What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The UCF Knights are up next, and before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough that schedule is, let's take a look back at what UCF did in 2023. Here are my projections and predictions last year for UCF. My projection had them at 6-6, and then my prediction for them was 7-5. UCF, of course, did go 6-6 in 2023 in the regular season, but if you count their bowl game loss at the end of the year, this team went 6-7 overall in 2023. So not a bad season for UCF. This is a pretty average type season for the Knights. You know, it seems like they're at least going to go 6-6 or 7-5 or 8-4 perhaps, but this was their first year in the Big 12, of course. Maybe that's why they went 6-6 overall. Here was the schedule from last year in the regular season, though, in 2023. And you look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Kent State, Boise State on the road, and then, of course, Villanova here in the non-conference. So they won all three of their non-conference games. Boise State was a tough one, ended up winning that game by 2. But then you look at the losses coming in the Big 12 last year. Lost to Kansas State, Baylor, Kansas, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Texas Tech. So like 6 losses in the Big 12 last year, and then 3 wins in the Big 12 against Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and Houston. And again, a pretty average type season here for UCF. Again, not a bad season for them in their first year in the Big 12. They made it to a bowl game at least. So let's now look ahead to 2024. Here's the schedule for UCF, and before we go game by game, let's take a look at who they will play in the non-conference for this upcoming season. So you look at their opponents in the non-conference. They will play New Hampshire, Sam Houston, and then, of course, on the road here at Florida in the non-conference. So that Florida game will be a tough one, especially playing on the road, but I think UCF does have a chance to be very competitive in that game. You know, the last 2 years have not really been good for Florida, at least under Billy Napier, so again, that will be a tough game on the road, but still, I think it will be a very competitive game there in the non-conference against like 2 Florida schools here and the universities and everything. And again, you got 2 easy games here with New Hampshire and Sam Houston, so that's a pretty favorable non-conference schedule for UCF for 2024. Let's go back to the schedule now and go game by game now for UCF. They will start things off, of course, with New Hampshire here on August 29th on a Thursday. Then they'll play Sam Houston here on September the 7th. So they will play 2 out of their 3 non-conference games here to kick off the season. And then after that, it's on the road here at TCU to open up Big 12 play on September the 14th. Then they get their first bye week here right after TCU before playing Colorado at home here on September the 28th. And then in the month of October, they go on the road to play Florida here on October the 5th, then back at home for Cincinnati here on October the 12th, then on the road here at Iowa State on October 19th, and then they'll play BYU here at home on October the 26th, and then in the month of November they play Arizona here on November 2nd at home, and then they go on the road to play Arizona State on November 9th, and then they get a bye week before playing West Virginia here on the road on November 23rd. So you got back-to-back road games there with Arizona State and West Virginia, but they do get a bye week in between those 2 back-to-back road games, which is the good news there. And then they close things out with Utah, of course, here on November 29th on the Friday. So that is the schedule for UCF for 2024. You look at the schedule here for the Knights, it's not really horrible, and it's also not very, very tough. Yes, you got Florida in the non-conference, but you look at the Big 12 schedule, the toughest games on this schedule, in my opinion, are Iowa State and West Virginia. Both of those games are on the road, but you also got Utah here, but the good news is you get that game at home as well. And you don't have to play Oklahoma State. You don't have to play Kansas or Kansas State. So you don't have to play those 3 teams there in the Big 12, which is really good news because some of those teams are pretty much the favorites to win it all in the Big 12 this year. But that's the schedule. Again, it's not a very tough schedule, and it's also not a horrible schedule for UCF for 2024. Let's now get a projection here for the Knights for 2024. This is the scale that I'll be using here for my projection. If it's a 1% game in the red, that percentage is going to count as an automatic loss, and then your 20% games here in the orange will be games where UCF will be about a double-digit underdog, and then your 40% games here in the yellow are going to be games where UCF will be a clear underdog game by about a touchdown, and then your 50-50 games will, of course, stay in the white. Really games that can go either way, and then your 60% games here in the purple will be games where UCF will be favored by about a touchdown, and then your 80% games here in the blue are going to be games where UCF will be favored by double digits. And then your 99% games here in the green are pretty much your easy wins and also your automatic wins there in that percentage. So we'll start with the easy wins here for UCF for 2024. I think you got a couple of automatic wins here with New Hampshire and Sam Houston. Both of those games in the non-conference, they should be easy wins here for UCF. However, they're not guaranteed wins, and also not like, pretty much, games that are definitely going to be games where UCF will take care of business in, even though they're counted as wins, but, they're not guaranteed wins because you never know what could happen in these, non-conference games. But either way, I think UCF will be big favorites in both of these games. Both of these games are going to be at least over 95%, from that 95 to 99% range, and they should overall take care of business in both of these games. They'll be favored by 18 to 21 plus points in both of those games. So those are your easy wins here for UCF. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. There's not really any other games on here where you can favor UCF by double digits and then also by about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, somewhere in that range. So let's skip over to the games where I think UCF will be underdogs in. I don't have any games in the 1% range, and I also don't have any games in the orange where I think UCF will be double-digit underdogs. However, I do have a couple games on here where I think UCF is going to be a clear underdog in by about a touchdown, and those two games are going to be on the road here at Iowa State and West Virginia. The reason why both of these games turn out to be in the yellow is just because they're both playing on the road. Iowa State might be a better team than UCF just a little bit. I think, the home field advantage is what makes the difference here. And that's the reason why I'm favoring the Cyclones here by at least a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, somewhere in that range. But I feel like it's going to be a pretty even matchup once we get into our predictions in the month of May and throughout the summer. And then West Virginia here on the road, just because that game is on the road, that's the reason why it ended up being a yellow game instead of like a 50-50 game. So I think both of these games, UCF will be clear underdogs in them by at least by a touchdown, 6, 7, 8 points, somewhere in that range. And then you got 8 total 50-50 games on here for UCF for 2024. You got that one non-conference game against Florida here on the road. I know that's a game that Florida could be favored in, but either way, I think this is a game that's pretty even here between these two teams, and based off of where the Gators were from last year, I think it's a pretty even matchup. And then TCU, Colorado, Cincinnati, BYU, Arizona, and then Arizona State and Utah all in the Big 12 here. I think Utah, besides those other teams, I think they are definitely the more talented team than UCF is, but playing at home, I think that's a pretty even matchup there when you got them at home, and it's a 50-50 game in my opinion. And then the rest of the games here, Arizona State, Arizona, BYU, Cincinnati, and TCU and Colorado. These are all pretty even matchups here in the Big 12, and they can definitely go either way. And again, when it comes to the Big 12 this year, it's going to be definitely a wide-open conference, and a lot of these teams are going to beat up on each other. Every game, and every game that you're going to be an underdog in. Either way, if UCF is an underdog against West Virginia and Iowa State, both of those games are definitely very winnable because the Big 12 is just going to be so competitive, and a lot of these teams are going to beat up on each other. So let's now get a projected record here for UCF for 2024. This is not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we counted a couple of those green games as automatic wins. And then you average out those two games in the yellow at 40%, and then you average out all 8 of these 50-50 games here at 50%. And the overall projected record for UCF comes out to be 6-6 here for 2024. So my projection is telling me that UCF is going to make it to a bowl game barely again this year. But again, the schedule really, it sets up nicely for UCF to have a pretty good season. Again, it is still a tough schedule when you got Florida there in the non-conference, and then you got some tough road games with Iowa State and West Virginia. Plus, playing Utah at home will be a tough one, even though it's at home, but either way, they don't have to play Oklahoma State, they don't have to play Kansas, and also Kansas State. So again, when you avoid those three teams there in the Big 12, that really sets your schedule up pretty nicely for a pretty good season for UCF. I definitely could see them going 7-5, maybe 8-4. 8-4 probably is going to be impossible to do, but 7-5 is likely to happen. And then, of course, if they go 5-7 or 4-8, that would definitely be a very big disappointment here for UCF for the upcoming season. But either way, my projection here for UCF for 2024 is 6-6. So give me your thoughts on this UCF team down in the comments below. What do you think their projected record is for 2024? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos right here on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.